time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to. Lots to talk about. General Frank McKenzie, the commander of U.S. Central Command, Monday from the Pentagon announced the last C-17 lifted off from Hamid Karzai International Airport, August 31st, 3:29 p.m. Eastern Time. The last flight out of Afghanistan, the end of our presence there, and the end of a 20-year-long war. Thank goodness. And for all of the bickering, all of the whining, all of the complaining, all of the finger pointing, all of the blaming, especially pointed at Joe Biden, there is enough to go around. But right now, we won. We accomplished our mission. Bin Laden is gone. It's now time to move forward and move on. Bring our people home, start taking care of them, and move forward in that way. Now, what's sad to me is there are so many people out there who are trying to take this moment and point it all at Joe Biden. It's all Joe Biden's fault. Joe Biden's the one who did all this. When he was handed a big you-know-what sandwich from multiple administrations. There was never any good going to come out of this for us long term. We could be there another 20 years, and this was going to be the same. Were there some mistakes on the ground at this moment? Yeah, there may have been. There may have been a decision that was made wrong. There certainly was a lot of intelligence that was wrong, especially that someone thought the Afghani army was actually going to be able to hold its own. But we are out. And it's about time. Now, that doesn't mean war is over. The war at home is only just begun. And until we get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th, the same forces are going to be out there pushing the same kind of divisive rhetoric, funding the same kind of white supremacy groups, the same kind of anti-government groups, the same kind of Republican Party groups who are organizing and pushing people to the school board meetings that we've been seeing all across the country. What we're heading for and what the right wing wants, what the fascist class wants, is a January 6th every single day. They want a January 6th every day in every school across this country that they don't agree with. They want chaos. They want anarchy. They want chaos for chaos' sake. And understand, these people are never, let me repeat, never going to be happy. You can never appease them enough. What's frightening on really just a scary level is the kind of rhetoric we're hearing from people that you would consider normally average, everyday, just people in your neighborhood who have been radicalized, who have spent all of their time glued to whatever grievance media outlet they're hooked on, believing that their lives didn't turn out the way they wanted, and it's because of fill in the blank. Whatever the rage machine wants them to be angry at, and it's school board members, that's where they are. And look, the people who are thrilled with this are the wealthy in this country. The rich people who keep the poor and working class pitted against each other, at each other's throats, so that we don't notice that they've been robbing us blind for decades, that they've been shortchanging us on wages and benefits and destroying our working conditions and our schools and our manufacturing base and our supply chains and all of this stuff. They're masters, absolute masters at keeping us in this constant stage of outrage. You go back to the book 1984 with the daily 2 minutes hate. It's no longer 2 minutes hate. It's 24/7 cable news. It's 24/7 Fox and OAN and this and that and crazy right-wing balloons. It's all kinds of crazy media, all tailored for one thing: to feed the anger, to keep people riled, to keep people ticked off, ready to go and kill their neighbors. And look, this isn't new. This is stuff that's been going on pretty much since the beginning of time. It's just now that they've mastered it. You go back to 2010 when the Tea Party spawn came out of the woodwork. This is the demon spawn of the Tea Party right now that we're seeing. And it's all funded by these rich, these wealthy donors, all funded by these secret groups, these shadow groups who fund these things to the hilt just to keep us pitted against one another. If you've been watching these school board meetings, and I have for the last couple of days, the woman in Escondido, California, wearing a mama t-shirt, talking about her cubs and how we're done asking for permission. The pandemic is over. This is our declaration of freedom. And then, we know who you are, and we're gonna do this and that. The guy in California, who Santa Monica, who's saying that over a mask, he's ready to start a civil war. He knows he's got a sign with all of the board members' names, addresses written on it. We know where you live. We're coming for you. It's going to be a civil war. You got this candidate in Northampton County, Pennsylvania, who said, forget going to these school boards with freaking data. We go into these school boards to remove them. I'm going in with 20 strong men, and I'm going to give them an option. You can leave or they can be removed. He's literally talking about physically removing elected board members and installing whomever he wants, much like they wanted to do on January 6th. He said that he was willing to die on this hill. Masks are now the hill we're willing to die for. Masks are now the hill that we're willing to start a civil war over. Masks are now the hill that society is completely breaking down. Forget 20 years of war in Afghanistan, dead soldiers, trillions of dollars in wasted revenue. Forget, that's not a problem. But a cloth that you're required to wear over your face in a classroom, that is a bridge too far. Willing to go get the guns. Now understand, this is what they've always wanted. This is what the fetish crowd has always wanted. These are the people who view themselves as uber patriots. These are the Tea Party people. These are the freedom folks. They're going to talk about freedom and liberty without actually understanding what that means. But understand, this is not just a couple of yahoos. Because you go, that's just some loudmouth from eastern Pennsylvania, or that's just some loudmouth on the West Coast. That's just some loudmouth in Tennessee. It's just some crazy person. No. This is well-funded, well-coordinated, well-orchestrated, and directed by right-wing hate radio. Anger, grievance radio fuels this rage with misinformation and the hateful rhetoric that comes out every day. They want to ruin your children's education. They want to control you. They want to take your liberty. They're coming for you. They're going to make you do X, Y, and Z. They're going to force you to get the shot, and it's got a chip in it, and it's going to make them follow you. All of this crazy conspiracy stuff. And they're eating it up. And now look, this didn't just happen. This has been 40 years in the making. This is a generation who was reared on anger and hate and grievance radio. This is the right-wing talk radio success story. This is exactly what the Powell memo is about. Get people, keep them there, keep feeding them your rhetoric, and you can save the free enterprise system for the wealthy. Now, what's interesting is, I'm struggling with where we are with the vaccine, where we are with the pandemic, because every time I see one of these right-wing mouthpieces who, has been an anti-masker, anti-vax person, saying, oh, it's all a big hoax, and I see them die from COVID, my first thought is, good, bye. You're no longer going to be spreading a message that's going to kill people. And I've said it a bunch of times on this show. It's bad for my karma. It's bad for my soul. And I want to understand what it is that makes someone go, I have the ability to protect myself. I have the ability to protect my family and my children and my friends, but I'm just not going to do it. I struggle with it. Until I read this article by this Dr. Baruch. And it's an interesting perspective that he put forward. But there was one line in there that really grabbed my attention, and I'll get to that in a minute. But he was talking about, from his experience as an ER doctor, where he sees these people every day. The folks who, they were the diehards until that tube comes out, until it's the end. And they know it's the end. He knows it's the end. They know it's the end. Then they beg for the vaccine. Then they beg for any help whatsoever. And he says, look, as a doctor, we go through this all the time. We see people who, they caught themselves on fire, lighting up a cigarette while on oxygen. And the first thing that they do when they get out of surgery is reach for a cigarette. We see people do dumb things. We see people who do what's not in their best interest. He said himself, look, I got high blood pressure and I'm elbow deep in a bag of chips. I know it's not the right thing. I do it anyway. And as I thought about what he was saying, I'm going, that's true. I get that argument. So how do we reach people if shame isn't it? Because that's the easy route. Ridicule and shame is the easy route. How do we reach people to help protect themselves? And there was a line in there that grabbed my attention. He says, quote, the anger I feel towards vaccine hesitant people becomes a more complicated emotion when I witness them reckoning with their choices. Many of the unvaccinated people I've talked to are hardworking, loving individuals struggling to catch a break in a life that hasn't been fair. They're unmoored and don't know what to believe when the truth itself has supply chain problems and the healthcare system has been letting them down for years. Now, I've been saying this for the longest time. The economy's let working people down. Our healthcare system's been letting working people down. Our pension systems have been doing it. Our social safety net has been not there to help when it's needed, and people are struggling. And I get that struggle. I get that anger. But I don't understand how you then go, the one thing that I can do to not end up dead is very simple. It's simply a shot, simply a vaccine. And it comes back down to the misinformation that they consume every day. It comes back to the billionaire class who funds these ultra-right groups who are, look, their goal is only to cause trouble, only to cause anarchy, only to cause chaos. Chaos for chaos' sake. So that we don't notice that over the course of the pandemic, our 700 billionaires increased their wealth by $1.8 trillion, or 62%. We don't notice that more for them, less for everyone else. We don't notice that Wages haven't kept up with inflation for decades. We don't notice that our standard of living is worse and worse and worse. We just know we're angry. And they feed that. They feed that incredibly well. 3 hours hate all day long. And there was nobody better than it than Rush Limbaugh. There was nobody better than it, from what I understand, than Phil Valentine. There was nobody better at it than the guy from Florida who almost his last breath was the whole thing's a hoax. At what point do we stop? Now this guy's argument was pretty simple. The more we communicate with each other, the more we talk, the more we try to understand, the better we can get. We need to hear people's stories. And I agree with that. I agree with we do need more people to tell their stories, especially those people who are on their deathbed, who, when truth really comes knocking, they find the answer. The weird thing is you listen to these people who say, well, I don't know what's in the vaccine, yet they're going to go to a Tractor Supply and buy a drug made for horses and for cow and for sheep as a deworming drug, and that's going to be their savior? They're going to dope up on zinc and hydroxychloroquine that's made for malaria and to treat lupus? Is that? But don't ask what's in those drugs. It's really a twisted time we live in, because he's right. The supply chain of information has been so badly screwed up, and the disinformation machine is what is dominating, because it's always easier to be against something. It's always easier to tear into something. It's always easier to attack someone than it is to actually have a solution. My grandfather always used to say, any idiot can tear down a house with a hammer. It takes a craftsman to build one. So the question is are we willing to tear our democracy down because some child has a hammer? Or is it possible that we can build up our institutions to help get us through this time? We will see. Sadly, I see a January 6th coming very soon. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day labor leader Luisa Moreno was born in Guatemala City. As a young woman, she fought for the admission of women into Guatemalan universities. After attending journalism school in Mexico City, Luisa moved to New York with her husband and worked as a seamstress. Outraged by low pay, racial discrimination, and poor working conditions, she led organizing efforts on the job. During the Great Depression, she worked as a full-time union organizer, first with the AFL, organizing black and Latina cigar rollers in Florida. But she also became active with the Communist Party and joined CIO efforts to organize cannery workers. Luisa led unionizing efforts of pecan shelling women workers in San Antonio, Texas, and then of cannery workers in Los Angeles. In 1938, Luisa helped organize the Spanish-speaking People's Congress. During World War II, she fought against discrimination in hiring of Mexicans in oil and war-related industries. In the 1940s, she became centrally involved in high-profile legal defense cases of Mexican-American youth prosecuted on frame-up charges. These included work around the 1942 Sleepy Lagoon case and then of victims of the Zoot Suit riots a year later. She continued union civilian work in California, helping to organize and represent walnut pickers. By 1950, she was caught in the crosshairs of the McCarthy-era witch hunts. Louisa was targeted by Operation Wetback and offered citizenship status in return for testimony against radical labor leader Harry Bridges. When she refused, she faced deportation on the accusation that she had once been a member of the Communist Party. She returned to Guatemala and continued organizing workers throughout Central America. Luisa Moreno died in Guatemala in 1992. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, one of my concerns is we're going to start seeing a January 6th type event every day as these school board meetings continue to happen. Because look, this angry crowd, you're never going to appease them enough. Never. It's not going to happen. They're not going to be happy until everyone's kid has had it and everyone's sick, because that's their worldview. I actually have someone who believes, just like the mumps and the measles when we were kids, everybody got it and everybody lived. Well, not everybody, but most people. This isn't the same. Please stop with the dime store epidemiology. You didn't get your degree from the Cracker Jack box. They don't do that anymore. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, are we going to see a January 6th every day thanks to these knuckleheads? And should we be looking into the actual January 6th as a way maybe to stave off what I fear is coming? And here to share some thoughts on all of that, I've asked our good friend Jeff Hauser to come talk with us. Jeff is the executive director of the Revolving Door Project at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure.
So my thought is, as I'm watching these videos from school board meetings across the country, is there's a well-organized, well-coordinated effort, well-funded effort to enrage these people and shoot them into school board meetings solely to take down our school boards, but also to create chaos and havoc.
Yeah, there are a few things going on. One is that January 6th as a topic of widespread, where there would be widespread disgust at the violence and behavior on January 6th, that is entirely receded from most coverage. Most people are not made to confront the enormity of the transgression of our democracy that occurred on that day, and the violence of it, and the sheer terror that were experienced by people who were literally in the Capitol building of the United States government. So that's one thing that's happened. It's receded. The second is we have social media that are not run by specific editors, but there is an editorial philosophy, and that is embedded in what are called algorithms. And an algorithm is just a fancy way for decisions. And so basically human beings set up algorithms. They tell the algorithm to favor some types of content based on some reason, and to fuel people on it, and like figure out what type of person might like something and give it to them. And what that does in the area of politics is tend to give people more extreme versions of what they heard before. And conspiratorial talk is really good at getting engagement, because once you start buying in to conspiracies, you're susceptible to accepting the next. So you have an entire population of people who exist in this ecosystem, which is disproportionately on the right. If you look at the most heavily engaged posts on Facebook every day, 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 come from crazy right-wing figures who would have had no traction in our media system 25 to 30 years ago. Those people consume that, and they are ready. They are like the latent shock troops of the right wing. And then you have the organized people, the cynics, the more people with institutional power, who want to use that anger to further their anti-government, anti-equality, anti-fairness, pro-kleptocracy inclinations. And that includes attacking public schools. I mean, there's no institution that has been more consistently the target of right-wing derision, than America's public schools. They hate the teachers' unions. They hate the idea. I mean, they believe in homeschooling. They believe in private schools. They certainly oppose integration. I mean, so much of the modern right-wing movement is still a reaction to Brown v. Board of Education and the desegregation of America's schools, or the end of school prayer. Like, these are key cultural touchstones, and algorithms create ever angrier people. And the right-wing elites use those shock troops to threaten the legitimacy of institutions like public schools in this country, and it's extremely dangerous.
No, it is. And you look at the rhetoric that's come out. Just today, I was looking at a handful of videos, one from Encinitas, California, where the guy's calling for civil war. He's got the addresses of all of the school board members. We're coming to your house and we're going to get our guns in civil war. You look at a guy from Northampton County, Pennsylvania, just a couple hours from where I sit, who's talking about getting 20 guys to go into a board meeting and throwing them out and reinstalling people that they want, and then voting the other way. And I'm going, this is not how democracy works, but this is how fascist rule does work. And these are the people that they're going to use, and the ideas that they want to be able to move us forward, just like they wanted to do on January 6th.
Yeah, it's terrorism in the sense that it's politically oriented fear creation. I mean, people forget that the night before January 6th, the night of January 5th, there were bombs placed outside the Democratic National Committee building. I believe actually the RNC as well. Because remember, they think there's an establishment Republican Party that is selling out the true Trump wing of the Republican Party. But that's still not even been solved, which is just a complete failure for the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. But there is terror. We all remember that there were death threats and bombs mailed to Soros and a bunch of other figures before the 2018 midterm elections. There was a bombing of a synagogue before the 2018 election. Right-wing terror in this country is a key fact that alters how people behave. There are going to be school board members who are not going to do what they think is right because they just don't want to deal with the possibility that one person's rhetoric is going to be reality. And they'd be crazy to assume it's impossible. It's certainly possible. We've been seeing real violence in this country, and that's worrisome. And as you said, in terms of fascism, I mean, the more times people bend their will to and terror succeeds, that only emboldens the terrorists. And right now, the lack of real repercussions for any of the senior figures who instigated January 6th has to be emboldening people on the right.
No, I've been saying all along, every one of the people who have been sentenced thus far has gotten a slap on the wrist, in my view. They should have been, the sentences should have been, multiple times more than what they got, to send a message for the future people who want another January 6th, who want that to happen every time something they disagree with happens. And I've said for a long time, all of these little exercises are just tests. They're little tests to see how far they can push and how our system will react. And sadly, we're not reacting. We haven't gotten to the bottom of January 6th. And I don't see Merrick Garland from the outside looking in. It doesn't appear to me that he's moving as quickly as I think we should be moving. And our political class isn't moving quickly either. We should have been knee deep into this already.
Yeah, I think Garland is of the view that we can de-escalate things by papering over differences and hoping that the anger that was exhibited on January 6th will dissipate over time. And the reality is that due to those algorithms I was discussing before, the anger is only deepening. It is not going away. The people who are building out that anger, they are feeling emboldened by the lack of action on January 6th, and the situation is going to get worse. I think Garland and Wray, the FBI director that Donald Trump installed when he fired James Comey, we still have the same FBI director as Donald Trump installed. And for some reason, Joe Biden and Merrick Garland have decided that that is a wise course of action, which I disagree with. But between Garland and Wray, we have two senior figures who are trying to de-escalate passions surrounding January 6th. They're letting the court cases play out in as quiet a manner as possible. They're not having high profile, like, here's the state of the investigation, here's the big picture of our understanding about how this came to be. which you could talk about without biasing or prejudicing any of the individual specific legal cases. But it's the big picture dynamics about January 6th, which I think have been lost from the conversation. I think that reflects a decision by Wray and Garland. It isn't like some cynical strategic desire to then rebuild it up in an election year. It's to just dampen the passions. People were appalled in January and February of this year. And the reaction, basically 60-70% of this country who are not stuck in those algorithmic hellholes are not paying attention to January 3rd. And it's the type of people who think, January 6th, and it's the people who think that those were martyrs. Those are the people who are thinking about it the most. And so what's going to happen is that the majority of society is going to forget, and the angry minority is going to get ever more aggrieved. And that imbalance does not lead to a good place.
No, you're absolutely right. And the rhetoric, and I don't know if you've noticed this as I have, the rhetoric is heating up. The threats are getting more frequent and more out, just completely, we're going to start a civil war. We're going to go in and we're going to throw you out and we're going to install other, anti-democratic rhetoric from its core. And it's being met with a collective meh.
I mean, the stakes, if you listen to somebody like Tucker Carlson, are enormous. He both sometimes explicitly and often implicitly embraces replacement theory, which is the view that essentially Jews are bringing minorities into the country to reduce white control of the United States. And this is one of the animating principles of Charlottesville, of the right-wing zealots there. And if you think that American society, as you conceive of it, is under attack, that critical race theory is going to brainwash your kid, if your kid is white, into like hating white people or something. If you actually like take those crazy ideas seriously, and you think freedom is that a mask mandate in a school is an act of fascism itself. If you think it's fascist, then it becomes an act of liberation and resistance to perpetrate violence. And it's inevitably we're going to see more violence, not less. And I think you just really have to scare people out of this sort of craziness, and you have to make the cynical people who are managing it on the high end really feel some negative consequences for their actions.
And that, again, comes back down to someone like Merrick Garland, who, to be honest, I'm sorry. And I know people who go, trust me, Rick, it's coming. They're going to go after Trump. They're going to hold Trump accountable. They're going to get all the people who are involved. It's going to take time. And I'm going, no, we don't have that kind of time. We don't have the wheels of justice grinding slowly kind of time, because the rhetoric keeps ramping up because no one sees that anyone's being held accountable. And look, it's my opinion, and you can disagree with me if you'd like, that we're never going to hold Trump accountable. We didn't hold Reagan accountable. We didn't hold H.W. Bush accountable. We didn't hold George W. Bush accountable for all his lies that got us into the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. What makes me think that we're going to hold Trump accountable? Especially with someone like Garland.
Yeah, I'm not optimistic right now. The Manhattan work seems to be moving at a very cautious way. And honestly, the Manhattan DA does not necessarily have the most slam dunk case out there. I think the Mueller investigation is kind of a bit of an original sin. They foreclosed the breadth of their own investigation, I think somewhat understandably, insofar as I think they were subject to being fired at like a moment's notice because Bill Clinton let the independent counsel law lapse. Mueller basically just served at the pleasure of the Attorney General. That Attorney General was Bill Barr. So I understand to some extent why he did not run a complete investigation and only track down some stuff. I think he thought, if I make the case of obstruction of justice clear enough, I don't need to go in after everything. This is such a slam dunk. It'll take care of itself. And obviously, Bill Barr managed to disappoint Robert Mueller, which shows you kind of what a naive fool. I mean, like a patriot and a commendable person on any number of different levels, Robert Mueller was. But ultimately speaking, at the biggest moment in his career, he was foolish and he got played by Bill Barr. And I think Merrick Garland is very much a figure like Bob Mueller. He's somebody who is a member of the establishment and has a difficult time picturing the modern Republican Party for what it is and how it does not reflect the genial people, whose homes he visits on the cocktail party circuit.
Yeah, and they're definitely not good people on both sides. But now I'm seeing that the January 6th investigation is going after phone records and possibly some of the members of Congress. And I'm like, how can you not, especially now that we know Jim Jordan had not one, but two, maybe even more conversations with Donald Trump that day. We now know that there were others who, Matt Gaetz supposedly had a conversation with Trump on that day. I think we have to know who was talking to the president, what was being said, and what was being coordinated.
Yeah, we have to. There are two things we have to do. We have to find out as many facts are possible, and we have to find out those facts and convey them in a way that forces the media to engage with it seriously and not get distracted. And the way you need clash, you will need dramatic moments. It's not just a matter of assembling the facts. Like the free market of ideas does not, whether or not it ever worked like optimally, which I think, I'm skeptical of, it is not working right now. One of the great skills that Mitch McConnell has, which is super simple in theory, even if maybe at times more difficult to execute, which is that if a topic is unpopular, it's not that he tells his people to vote the popular way. It's just don't engage with them. Change the topic. So whenever we're going to talk about Trump and January 6th, they'll try to talk about critical race theory or Afghan rebels coming up through the Mexico border to give us super COVID or something. They're going to come up with crazy stuff. And it's our job to try to make the truth not only true, but as dramatic as possible, to find targets who will fight back so that there's clash, that there's dispute, and there's some interesting television and social media content to share.
Yep.
We need this to not only be true, but we need it to be vivid so that people can remember how scary January 6th really was.
Which is why I was against Nancy Pelosi not allowing Jim Jordan on the Republican side. I wanted Jordan on that dais so that Liz Cheney could point to him and go, "You were there. Why did you do this?" And he's already there. I don't ever see him being subpoenaed and sitting in the chair. For me, that was a way to get him there and do just what you said.
Yeah, I don't think the current generation of Democratic leaders is uncomfortable with the messy types of politics which are needed. In an era where there were 3 network news channels and what they decided people should know was the main basis of common information in this country, a certain gentility worked as a political strategy. But now we are fighting desperately for attention, and Democrats are not comfortable forcing attention on the issues that they want to elevate.
I'm right there with you. Jeff, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Always good talking with you. Thanks so much, brother.
Thank you.
Good stuff. This is Jeff Hauser, Executive Director of the Revolving Door Project at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Make sure you check out their website, revolvingdoorproject.org. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the day that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Revenue Tax Act, more popularly known as the Wealth Tax. The act reformed the federal income tax to raise rates on the wealthiest in the nation. Those making over $5 million a year could pay taxes up to 75%. In a speech to Congress that summer, Roosevelt had explained his thoughts on wealth and taxes. The president said, quote, "Wealth in the modern world does not come merely from individual effort.
It results from a combination of individual effort and of the manifold uses to which the community puts that effort. The individual does not create the product of his industry with his own hands. He utilizes the many processes and forces of mass production to meet the demands of a national and international market. Therefore, in spite of the great importance in our national life of the efforts and ingenuity of unusual individuals, the people in the mass have inevitably helped to make large fortunes possible. Without mass cooperation, FDR said, great accumulation of wealth would be impossible save by unhealthy speculation. The president went on, as Andrew Carnegie put it, where wealth accumulates honorably, the people are always silent partners. Whether it be wealth achieved through the cooperation of the entire community or riches gained by speculation, in either case, the ownership of such wealth or riches represents a great public interest and a great ability to pay. Although FDR tried to win over the nation's wealthy by quoting industrialist Andrew Carnegie, he did not gain their support. Not surprisingly, many of the nation's wealthy lobbied for and used tax loopholes to evade paying the new tax rates. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So all the rhetoric surrounding what's going on in Afghanistan, all the blame on Biden, it's all Biden's fault. All the division over the death of our soldiers, and it's all by design, as I've said for the longest time. This is a way to keep the working class of this country pitted against one another, to keep that constant rage, that constant chaos in place. But the question comes down to, is this solely the work of the wealth class dividing us so that we don't realize how badly we've been getting screwed for the last 40 years? Is this them and their mayhem makers? Is this the Russians? Is it the North Koreans, the Iranians? Or is it the Chinese? Or is it all of them? And here to share some thoughts on, how is this going to affect how we deal with the international community, especially the Chinese? Because I see them as, well, I'm seeing them kind of finding their way into the middle of this. And here to share some thoughts on, well, what this might look like, I've asked our good friend Emily de la Bure to come talk with us. She's the co-founder of Horizon Advisory, horizonadvisory.org, their website. She's my go-to expert on all China. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
So am I overly concerned about the Chinese finding their way into Afghanistan? And, well, Afghanistan's rich in minerals. They're rich in a bunch of things. Am I concerned about that?
It's a tough one, and one that goes in every direction. Wherever China is concerned or is involved, let's say, not wrong to be concerned, would be a first hot take. And on the Afghanistan question in particular, I think Beijing is rightfully a little ambivalent. On the one hand, it's absolutely been in China's interest to see the US diverting its attention towards the Middle East, diverting resources there, strained, and also seeing its global profile decrease as a result of our presence. And also, it's absolutely in China's interest to see the US now on the retreat and being viewed as a failed power, absolutely, in this engagement. However, China doesn't want instability in the Middle East. That's really bad for them. They worry about what it means for global resources, what it means for terrorism, including terrorism on their border, and just for general instability that can directly affect their domestic affairs. And they don't want to be sucked into what they see as endless conflict and unresolvable conflict in that region. Like, they don't want to have to be the players with a military presence in the Middle East. And the US has been doing that for China, for the world, for years now. That said, we know that Beijing is adept at taking advantage of any opening that we leave China. And this is bound to be no exception. There's already been the outreach between Beijing and the Taliban. They know where to find resources that matter, and this is an empowered China over the past year that's not going to shirk from any opportunity.
Right. And I look at the stunt that they tried to pull in Vietnam ahead of Vice President Kamala Harris's visit, where I guess she was delayed for a couple of minutes, and they tried to swoop in and say, no, instead of the 1 million or the 1 billion doses of whatever the vaccine, we're going to give you 2. And again, it's what they do. It does show how emboldened they think they are.
And really, up until about a year ago, this was a China that played kind of a game in the wake of the US and was absolutely competing with America, but was doing so like by being the spoiler on the corner or right behind. And now Beijing is like absolutely willing to do that, to get in front of the story, and to be on the center stage going blow for blow. And that was true in Vietnam with the vaccines. It's going to be true across the board, and it's what is true of rhetoric coming out of China. They have this new buzzword phrase of dual circulation that everyone's talking about, and no one quite understands. But what it effectively means is that China now sees itself as the driving force for how things are moving internationally.
And I would argue a lot of that has to do with our misadventures in the Middle East, our divisions at home, especially because, look, I don't view the Taliban as a dangerous force to me in any way, shape, or form right now. And I don't view them as dangerous as perhaps some of the people that live in my neighborhood, and some of the insanity that we've been seeing with our domestic terrorists who are now terrorizing our school board meetings.
There's a story that we're not necessarily talking about right now, which is that so domestically we have this insane division and fragmentation and everything moving in opposite directions. And at the same time in China, we're seeing an absolute crackdown intended to put everybody on the same page and in line with the Chinese Communist Party. And both of these stories are being covered individually, but they're not being put together in terms of the asymmetry this creates and what it means that we're getting one player crack down on its authoritarian control over the entire society, while the other player fails for even 1 second to be on the same page.
And again, we've talked about this before, where our freedoms have really been our biggest downfall, especially when dealing with China, because they come in, they buy things up, they basically leave us with empty shells of factories and manufacturing capacity and beyond. I mean, like you said, they're walking in the same direction while we're ripping each other apart. It is one and the same story, I think.
Which is going to be, just to absolutely switch onto a whole other news headline or story right now, that's going to be the big question of the infrastructure bill. If we're putting that money into American infrastructure, that's the kind of thing that can restore some degree of U.S. cohesion, in the very least, U.S. manufacturing. But historically, that's also been the kind of thing where China comes in and does all the infrastructure building, and uses American spending as an opportunity to be an even stronger presence in the U.S. And further virtualize our economy and further tear us apart. So that's going to be I think we've gotten to this point with the idea that there's a commitment to spend money, kind of. And the real question is going to be, how is that money spent? And is it something that defends against what China's doing or feeds into it?
No, and that's the one thing that I think does unite us as a country. And I, no matter who I talk to, if it's a flag waving Trump supporter, it's buy American provisions in our procurement policies. It's making sure that the steel we're using is made here in the U.S. The welders that are doing the job are from here in the U.S. I think that's one of those things that could potentially, if this was done right, actually bring us back to somewhere near, maybe not together, but at least somewhere in the same arena.
Yeah. And on board with what's taking place, with what our leadership is doing. Because then you can have some amount of faith that there's actually an effort to restore the U.S. real economy and jobs in America, and to provide services to Americans, because that's what infrastructure does. So this is the big opportunity, but then what happens if China does what it did in 2008-2009 and at every other juncture it's had, and make sure that it's Chinese companies that are providing this deal? or
No, and I don't blame them. Look, I don't blame them at all.
It's brilliant.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
They're simply figuring out how to use our rules against us. And we allow it to happen. I've been saying our trade deals are bad, are horrible, abysmal. But I don't blame them for doing it to us. I blame us for allowing it to happen. If you steal my lunch out of my hand, it's my fault for letting you do it.
Oh, yeah. Like, I wish we were playing as smart as they are. It's mind blowing. And like, they are better at our legal system than we are, which is insane. And they're better at recruiting like the best US lawyers to be good at our legal system than we are. And that's not a great position to be in.
No, but then again, it comes back down to the money and the hidden money and all of the resources that go into keeping us divided. And that's why I keep asking, who is it that's funding these groups? Because it's eerily familiar as you go from state to state to state, where all of these people are all on the same page. They're all barking the same orders. They're all making the same threats. There's coordination here, and there's a funding mechanism that is moving them in this direction.
Yeah. And, I don't want to be the one, to be spouting major conspiracies, but like, it's true that all of that does benefit China. And even if they're not the direct player, they're absolutely going to be ready to amplify any message that's in their interest and to make sure it reaches the people that it's in their interest for them to reach. And there's also like no question that Chinese policy and discourse are very clear about how important and easy it is to influence the subnational level in the US. Like, they have a whole line of efforts that's about developing state and local level influence over governments, over private sector industry players, over like cultural and educational institutions. And the idea is, like, if not necessarily to be the player that's spreading the narrative, then to create a fertile landscape for that narrative, so that everybody is ready to believe or to think whatever is in China's interest.
So how come that's not across every headline, and every person in this country isn't on the top of the brain? Because I'll tell you, when I look at their manufacturing prowess, and I look at the number of jobs that we have in manufacturing at this moment, and maybe it's just because I'm a manufacturing geek, I'm like, we have fewer jobs than we had when my grandparents were alive and working, and we were a fifth of the population. There's something wrong, Houston, and it comes back down to what we build. It comes back to our supply chains. It comes back to the policies we've allowed to get rammed through, so that a handful of people could get really rich and a generation of workers could get screwed.
Yeah, and we're at the point where, so like, base level economics, that's really bad for the country, but we're also at the point where this is like fundamental national security. Like, we can't make what we need to like maintain our military, and we should be at a point where everybody can agree that this is a really, like, a very real problem, not just the people who recognize the value of manufacturing for an economy and for a society to be maintained. Because at least there's supposed to be a consensus that we need a military and we need to self-protect. And we're so far in the red. And I'm not sure anybody is out there with the headlines agreeing. No,
it's crazy where we are. So the question is there a way to undo the direction we're heading? Because as you've said, China views itself as the superpower of the next generation. And, we and the rest of the globe, I don't know what the answer is going forward.
Yeah, and so China's big playbook is not only beat us at our game, and not only subsidize and use non-market measures to take over strategic industries and manufacturing. It's also to target the new domains that technology is creating, in particular as quote unquote leapfrog opportunities, and especially to build the infrastructures of those new domains. So there's a category called new infrastructures. It's been a huge deal in Chinese industrial policy for the past 3 years. And that's where the real push is. And we talk here about, there's a science and technology race. We have to beat them at AI. We have to beat them at big data. Beijing believes that, but their focus isn't on the research and development. It's on building the real economy and the infrastructures that are necessary to support those technologies. So electric vehicle charging stations, data centers, the industrial Internet of Things, high-speed rail. everything that's like physical and without which we can't apply these technologies, but also that you can use to project them and their power internationally. And it's a brilliant strategy. Again, like they're doing this right. But I also like to think that as we lose ground, that also is an opportunity for us. It is a new battle that's like taking place in terms of manufacturing and in terms of the industrial competition because technology is making it such. And China's been going about it in a smarter way, but we're still just at the starting line because these technologies really still are just taking shape. So if we can take our infrastructure efforts and our like newfound consensus on the need for this and on manufacturing and point it in the smart direction, which is towards like actually applying new technologies and building the infrastructures that are going to allow like not just the research and development, but the infrastructures that are going to allow our society to take advantage of that and to have relatively similar access to it, that resolves so much. That takes care of manufacturing. It makes us more competitive in new domains. And it also provides the basic access to services like networks and connectivity that can let our society like actually have some degree of opportunity access pervasively, and that we don't have in a world where there's like no wireless in much of the country.
So last line of questioning I want to get into, because we want to get to where you're talking about going. The right will tell you the way we get there is we cut taxes, we cut regulation, and we let the free market decide. Those on the left are going to go, no, we need targeted investment. We need smart policy. We need a big chunky infrastructure bill, like the $3.5 trillion bill, like the $1.2 trillion. We need that. And even I would argue we need more. We need something even bigger than the $1.2 trillion hard infrastructure bill. Is either side right? Is there a blend? How do you see a way to get where we need to go?
In any area that's strategic, if we absolutely just let the free market, we're going to get China because they're going to bend the free market to their will, or not their will, but to their interests. And I think that it means we need industrial policy. We can't, because we're not China, have the same kind of state-led model that they do, because that's just not how we work. But yeah, we need targeted industrial policy that includes Made in America provisions and that supports U.S. manufacturing in vertically integrated supply chains, or at least loosely vertically integrated supply chains. So we're not just making the end product, we're also making the multiple steps along it. That's going towards the targeted areas that matter. And ideally, it's not clunky and it's not the government trying to figure out how things work, but it is smart and focused on the right areas.
As I say, I'm not against the idea of public-private partnerships. I'm not against the use of public money to do private ventures, just as long as the public benefits from it. If we need roads or bridges, I'm not against the idea of hiring a private company to do it with certain parameters in place. But ultimately, it's got to benefit we the people. We don't use public money to put up a toll road for private interests to cash in on. It just seems counterintuitive. So for me, it's got to be smart investment. We're going to see where this goes, and sadly, I don't have a lot of hope for where we are in this country in this moment, especially as we are this divided. But Emily, I appreciate you taking some time and sharing your expertise. As always, great stuff.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Our good friend Emily de la Bruyere. Make sure you check out their website, horizonadvisory.org. Good stuff there. We'll take a quick break right here. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. That was the day that one of the most pitched battles in U.S. labor history, the Battle of Blair Mountain, began in West Virginia. Coal fueled the engines of industry, keeping the trains moving and the steel mills humming. Labor organizing in the coal fields faced violent repression. The conflict turned bloody at Mattawan. friend of labor, local lawman Sid Hatfield, had won a gun battle against armed members of the notorious Baldwin Felts Detective Agency. Then, other Baldwin Felts agents, brought to West Virginia by the mine owners, gunned down Hatfield in cold blood. The miners' anger boiled over. 600 miners gathered under the United Mine Workers of America District 17 banner. The armed miners were determined to march into the state's southern coal fields. Their aim was to promote the union effort and sweep away the gunmen hired by the mining companies. As they marched, more and more miners joined them. As many as 10,000 miners converged on Blair Mountain. The high ground stood between the unionized northern part of the state and the less organized southern mines. At Blair Mountain, they met Logan County Sheriff Don Chafin, who had amassed an army of 3,000 armed men to repel the miners. Chafin's men had dug trenches, blocked roads, and marshaled machine guns to stop the Union men. In the battle that ensued, 1 million rounds were fired. The mine owners hired private planes to drop shrapnel bombs on the miners. The United States Army finally arrived. The miners, many of them World War I veterans, surrendered. Although the owners had won, what occurred at Blair Mountain drew national attention to the unsafe working conditions and the brutality of the coal barons in the coal fields.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Corporate bosses across America have been sputtering in outrage at you working stiffs this summer, spewing expletives about the fact that while the U.S. economy has been coming back, you haven't. Labor shortage, they squeal, lazily accusing the workforce of mass laziness. They charge insultingly that millions of workers got used to laying around during the pandemic, noting that there is now an abundance of jobs open for everything from restaurant workers to nurses. The bosses and their political dogs bark that you people need to get back in the old harness and start pulling again. Adding a nasty bite to their bark, several GOP governors cut off unemployment benefits to people, hoping to force them to work. Other businesses have proffered signing bonuses, free dinner coupons, and other lures, while such notoriously mingy outfits as McDonald's and Walmart have even upped their wage scale in an effort to draw workers. Yet, no go. In fact, to the astonishment of the economic elite, the employment flow this year is going the other way. Record numbers of current workers in all sorts of jobs in every section of the country are voluntarily walking away. There's even an official economic measurement of this phenomena called the quits rate, and it is surging beyond anything our economy has experienced in modern history. In April, 4 million workers quit. In May, another 3.6 million left, and in June, 3.9 million said adios. The quits are so unexpected and so widespread that pundits have started dubbing this year the Great Resignation. This is Jim Hightower saying, what's wrong with people? Why are such staggering numbers of Americans failing to do their jobs? But wait, maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the corporate system's jobs are failing the people. Consider this. The most common comment by those who are walking out is, I hate my job. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I've been saying, one of the things that's most concerning to me is that we're seeing all of this organizing going on in the realm of we're going to go after those school boards. We're going to get those school board members. We know where you live. We're going to get 20 of my buddies, and we're going to physically remove you, and we'll put in the people that we want. And as I said, this is what they wanted to do on January 6th. This is the mindset. They went there to stop the certification of election on January 6th. Now they want to go into school boards to physically stop them from doing something as egregious as keeping their children safe. It's crazy, but it is where we are. And here to share some thoughts on, just some of the insanity that's going on. I've asked J.J. Abbott to come talk with us. J.J. is the Executive Director of Commonwealth Communications. Their website, vote.pa. J.J., thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick. Glad to be here.
So I'm looking at this guy from Northampton County running for county executive. He's men got to be men again, JJ. Getting too soft. We're going to get 20 of his men. And they're going to walk in and they're going to throw those bums out and they're going to install people and they're going to make their decision. And that's how it's going to be, JJ.
That is America, I guess, now.
It's the way they want it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what is most important about this whole thing is that, the reason why people are getting mad and screaming and hollering at meetings is because they're making up for something else. And that's a lack of majority support. I mean, when, for all the rumblings about the pushback around COVID, there's really only one poll that seems to actually matter. And that's how many people that got vaccinated. And in that poll in Pennsylvania, that poll is like 65% of adults that are fully vaccinated and 80% of people that have at least one shot. So I think the reason why these people are going and yelling, other than there's a bunch of right-wing, very wealthy people that are helping finance them. Besides that reason, it's really because I think they have to make this scene in order to seem bigger than they really are. And I think, it's what we're seeing is that school boards are not buying it. In Pennsylvania, yes, there are 500 school districts, but something like 200 of them now have some sort of mask requirement in place. And that represents well over half of the half of the student population in Pennsylvania. So I think this is a big loser in the eyes of parents and students and other people in the community who are like, I don't want decisions about schools or child safety being made by the loudest people in the room. Like, we are the majority. We're the people that got vaccinated. We wore masks. We wear them when the risk is high. Like, we are the majority. So I think the reality is, like, these people are going to make a big scene, but we need to out-organize them. And because we have a much more receptive audience, which is like all the people who got vaccinated that just want to move on. We want to get back to fixing the other problems other than the pandemic that we had long before this virus ever appeared.
No, I agree with you, but for me, this is just another meal in the rage machine's buffet. This is just another part of that rage machine. This
Absolutely.
is about,
and they keep going in between masks and vaccines and critical race theory and all of these things that are not any of the top 10, 25, 100, 1,000 problems, because we have a lot of real problems in America and in Pennsylvania, even more specifically. But it's always a distraction. Whenever the country's trying to come together and actually get things done, like they're trying to do right now in Washington, they just throw everything at the wall to try to divide the country so that they can keep the status quo. And what does that status quo do? It keeps working people down with low wages and crappy benefits, while the billionaires continue to get richer and richer through pandemic and economic catastrophe. This is all about dividing the country around issues that don't actually matter in order to prevent the kind of change that we came out and a vast majority of Americans voted for in 2020, whatever they believe about that.
No, but again, where I'm going with this is, and you've hit on all of the main points, this is just one more step in that rage machine that they have built through talk radio, through the algorithms of social media, through cable news. It's all getting these people all wadded up, all angry and all fired up to fight battles, so that they're willing to take up arms. I literally know people who are they want civil war. In fact, there's a guy calling for civil war over the mask mandate. How dare the school board do this? We're going to come to your house and it's going to be a civil war. Because this JJ, whether you agree with me or not, this is what a segment of our population wants desperately. They want to go and have armed conflict in the street because they fashion themselves as some kind of uber patriots who are fighting for some democracy or some freedom that we've never had and will never have.
Yeah, and I agree. There is this faction that that wants to sort of hold us back, and subsets of that faction are even going to those extremes. But I think, when you look at the issue sets that majorities of Americans or Pennsylvanians, and sort of how I look at it, actually want to see happen, I mean, there is unanimity. There is a majority of people who I think completely reject that, and the reality is that this is what the voter suppression is about, right? It is about trying to make it even harder for certain segments of people to vote in order so that they can protect this sort of minority rule that we see at all levels of government. And so, I think it's just another reminder how important it is that we're organizing against them. We're building infrastructure to fight back, and that we're mobilizing people through action to get out and vote, but also to get active in things like the school boards. Because I think going back to the school boards, the one good thing that we've seen over the last few weeks is that people are starting to fight back. You see doctors and nurses in their communities organizing to fight back against this rhetoric around masks and vaccines. That's complete nonsense. You see moms and dads and all sorts of teachers and former teachers coming to meetings that they've never gone to before and saying, like, this is not who we are. This is not what we want. We want you to do the thing that makes sense, which is to keep kids in school by keeping them safe. And so, I think what we have to look at is that, yes, there are these loud people. Yes, there are these extremists that are trying to divide us, but there's a lot of people who are coming together to fight back. And I think that's really the most important thing that we've seen over the last few weeks. While we've heard all of this nonsense and seen some really ugly and divisive things, at the end of the day, that's what we need more of is people coming together to try to actually get things done for our communities that will help our neighbors.
I agree with you. Now, another entree on the Rage Buffet is, and you brought it up a second ago, about voting. They still have...
Rick, in Pennsylvania, I corrected. We call that the smorgasbord. We don't.
Okay, the Rage Smorgasbord. The reason I don't say it is I have a hard time saying smorgasbord. But one of the things coming up now is evidently can't let go of the 2020 election. There are some, Senator Doug Mastriano and his faction who can't get past the fact that the former guy lost. I guess are we moving towards kind of an Arizona kind of thing? Is that happening? I mean, I've been seeing stories about this. Chris Dush, Jake Corman evidently said some things that have us in a weird spot. Where are we going here with, there's maybe another recount coming? What?
Yeah. So, I mean, the one like scam after another scam after another scam, which, is just kind of indicative of how these people operate, always trying to distract us from the sort of things that they're actually supposed to be doing. But I think, so what we've seen over the last few weeks is there have been this sort of like big public show where they went from the audit by Mastriano to an audit by essentially the same person not named Doug Mastriano. And that was supposed to represent some sort of shift into a better direction. But at the end of the day, what this really is that there's an ultimate goal, and that's to continue the big lie, to convert it into something that seems more legitimate than the insurrection or the stop the steal nonsense that we saw right after the election. And this is all part of the bigger game that we're seeing across the country. It's the same as the legislation, as these recounts, as these investigations and hearings that they're doing conveniently in all the swing states that they have any semblance of power. And so this audit, quote unquote, election review scam that they've cooked up is just a bit all part of that. And what the ultimate goal is to undermine the 2020 election, undermine vote by mail, which was such an important component of making sure people had access to the polls, undermine and make it harder, pick out certain things and try to create controversy about them. and then create justification for scaling back vote by mail or getting rid of drop boxes or making it harder for people's votes to count or be cast. So I think what we're seeing now is that they know the ultimate goal, which is they want to undermine, they want to create all of this chaos in the press. And then they're just working backwards from there. So they got a new guy in charge, and has apparently no plan yet, but he's going to work backwards from that, and whatever it takes to use all the levers of government that they have to make that argument. That's what they're going to try to do, and we'll have to see if it becomes as big of a circus as Arizona, but no doubt it's going to be of a similar flavor.
No, it's crazy. I mean, I never agreed with the Pennsylvania Republican Party. I never did.
Shocking.
But I never thought there were as many crazy people in that party as now. Look, I never thought Jake Corman was crazy. I'm now looking at this going, well, I guess I was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone really had this sort of on the menu, sort of, get Mastriano all mad by kicking him off the audit, but then still try to do the exact same thing with a very similar person. I think it was very unexpected to people, and unfortunately, I think while all of this is in service of trying to please Trump and the people who follow him in their districts, what the real cost is all of the things that they're not doing for Pennsylvania, which is a pretty hefty list at this point. And we've had this Republican legislature for essentially the last 30 years. And so, it's just just like we talked about before, it's just another distraction from sort of what people, the majority of people in Pennsylvania actually want them to be doing, which is certainly not this.
But the difference is they were never going to do the things we needed them to do. So at least
absolutely, yeah. But we've seen it before with abortion bills and gun bills and other things where it just creates this distraction and it fills the time that they're in session, but it doesn't actually get anything done. And it sort of feeds the beast in terms of their politics at home, and then that's sort of that all that gets done. So I think hopefully that this just doesn't completely consume all of the attention, but that's probably their intention.
But isn't that the point, though, JJ? I mean, you're
Yes.
someone who's been around Pennsylvania politics a long time. That is the point. The point is to feed the base the red meat that's going to get them out in the midterm election, because the calculus is the only way they're going to be able to beat the Democrats in the midterm, and especially if we get a good size infrastructure bill, is to demonize, is to tear down, is to blame, is to do the things that they're doing, feeding the angry crowd the red meat that they need to show up and cause chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what we're seeing is that there's also energy against exactly what they're trying to do. And that's why, in Pennsylvania, we've seen this real growth of progressive organizing across the state. That's so important, in Western Pennsylvania with organizations like Pennsylvania United and One Pennsylvania, and we're seeing in Philadelphia and in the suburbs, progressive organizing by organizations like For Our Future and a lot of labor unions that are really active across the state, and new organizations like the New Pennsylvania Project and Make the Road. These are actually organizing people to in a different direction, which I think is really important, is that we need to be organizing all the time. You can see exactly that's what the right is doing. They're trying to pick these issues. They're trying to get people to sign up for their email lists and get ginned up to give them donations around them. But we need to fight back against that by, being not just opposition to them, but also, to your point, getting things done that deliver for the people that came out and voted for Democrats and progressives in 2020. So that right now, the most important thing that anyone can be doing is organizing towards getting those things done, delivering on things like infrastructure and jobs and care and climate and voting rights. and really make an immigration and making sure that we are delivering for the people who delivered power to the Democrats in Washington. And so I'm really, I think we've seen good signs of movement in that direction, particularly around the reconciliation bill. So we got to get those things done because we need to unite the country around something that that we're delivering and that they can fight to protect, or else Republicans are going to win the day with these, crazy distractions and divisions.
And ultimately, we got to make sure everyone has access to the ballot box and
Absolutely.
can vote.
So if you go to vote.pa and you live in Pennsylvania, you can figure out how to register to vote, how to vote by mail. And once you get your ballot, you can find a drop box there. So, absolutely, Rick. We need everybody to get out and vote, because right now we're seeing, the guy you kicked off the show who called for the insurrection at the school board meetings. That guy is running to be the Northampton County executive, one of the largest counties in Pennsylvania. And so these are the local elections this year are going to be absolutely essential to make sure we're electing people who are putting our actual communities first.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I don't know why that guy hasn't already been arrested. That is a terroristic threat in my view. Because there was no veiled anything. We're going in there. We're going to throw you out. Much like the guy out in California where we're coming to your house and we're going to start a civil war. We got some interesting days ahead. But, JJ, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing some of your expertise. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rick. Appreciate you having me.
Good stuff, JJ Abbott. Executive Director there of the Commonwealth Communications. Vote.pa is the website. I'm going to get it right, I tell you. Vote.pa. JJ Adams. I gotta go. I got a break right here. Right back after this.
Saving work in America. One show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day labor leader Luisa Moreno was born in Guatemala City. As a young woman, she fought for the admission of women into Guatemalan universities. After attending journalism school in Mexico City, Luisa moved to New York with her husband and worked as a seamstress. Outraged by low pay, racial discrimination, and poor working conditions, she led organizing efforts on the job. During the Great Depression, she worked as a full-time union organizer, first with the AFL, organizing black and Latina cigar rollers in Florida. But she also became active with the Communist Party and joined CIO efforts to organize cannery workers. Luisa led unionizing efforts of pecan shelling women workers in San Antonio, Texas, and then of cannery workers in Los Angeles. In 1938, Luisa helped organize the Spanish-speaking People's Congress. During World War II, she fought against discrimination in hiring of Mexicans in oil and war-related industries. In the 1940s, she became centrally involved in high-profile legal defense cases of Mexican-American youth prosecuted on frame-up charges. These included work around the 1942 Sleepy Lagoon case and then of victims of the Zoot. Continued union work in California, helping to organize and represent walnut pickers. By 1950, she was caught in the crosshairs of the McCarthy-era witch hunts. Luisa was targeted by Operation Wetback and offered citizenship status in return for testimony against radical labor leader Harry Bridges. When she refused, she faced deportation on the accusation that she had once been a member of the Communist Party. She returned to Guatemala and continued organizing workers throughout Central America. Luisa Moreno died in Guatemala in 1992. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, one of the things that I truly believe is all of this outrage, all of this this push to get these radical voices front and center is really just about just causing that kind of chaos, that kind of uncertainty, that kind of anger that fuels the conservative base. Not so much on the left, not so much on the liberals, a little more cerebral, a little bit more in the gray area, as opposed to thinking about things. On the extreme right, it's black and white. Either for it or against it. It's either good or bad. Either I get to see my beautiful children's face or I don't. And I'll die on the hill that says my kids have to wear a mask, which is weird. And it's all part of this, like I said, this rage buffet. I mean, it is just another, little side dish of so many, because it's all they have. There's nothing else. If you look at what the GOP has to run on in 2022, all they've got is rage. There's no agenda. There's no policy initiatives. They've got no ideas. JJ said, they're not doing any other work. They weren't doing any work to begin with. There's nothing there. There's not. There's no policy chops whatsoever. Nothing. They're going to do nothing for working people, and we already know that. But they want to try and destroy the one guy who does. Because fear and smear is all they have. I've said it a million times. Biden was not my number one choice. But he's moving in the right direction. These infrastructure bills, the $1.2 trillion one, the hard infrastructure bill, we need that. I wish it was more, wish it was bigger, wish it was much chunkier, much more visionary, much more transformational. In the $3.5 trillion bill, I'm still not sure that's enough. To undo 40 years of assaults on a social safety net, to try now to pick up where the past couple of generations have pocketed the wealth of this country in ways that we're never getting back. What the right understands masterfully is that their minions are loyal. Their people are going to march in lockstep. They're going to do what they're told. They're going to get angry when they're supposed to. They're going to flip the switch on. Like a Pavlovian dog, they'll start to drool. And all they have to do is point them in the direction. And Trump did this on January 6th. He knew what he was doing. He knew he was riling them up, and he knew exactly where he was pointing them. And he knew exactly what he wanted to happen. Because they were clear, we're going to stop this. We're going to stop the certification of the election. And these people are saying the exact same rhetoric around school boards, having the audacity to say, no, your kids are going to have to wear a mask. Or you can teach them at home. It's not like you're going to come and we're going to duct tape their mouths shut and put bubbles over their head. Nobody's saying that. You got a choice. This is what conservatives used to believe. They used to believe in choice. We're giving them choice. You have the ability, keep your kid at home. Find another school. Or wear the damn mask. That's what conservatives claimed they believed in. But this isn't even about the mask. It's about the outrage. It's about the anger. It's about feeding that fire. It's about feeding that rage. It's about the grievance. Because Republicans are masterful at distraction. Hey, shiny thing, squirrel, butterfly, whatever. They're great at it. In fact, I was watching a Fox News segment with Maria Bartiromo. And she asked Kevin McCarthy, point blank, quote, will you lead drawing up articles of impeachment? Will you look into the 25th Amendment? Rick Scott tweeted out, it's time to look at the 25th Amendment now that we see all these missteps from Joe Biden. I'm not quite sure which missteps, all these missteps. There were a couple of things in Afghanistan that maybe I would have done differently, that maybe the generals wish they had done differently, that maybe our intelligence was a little better. But ultimately, I think Biden did the best he could do with what he had. A deadline to get out. And we got out. almost 150,000 people and no casualties of the flights coming out. No, we had a terror attack. That was something that was unfortunate and predictable. And yet they chose to take that and make that political. But this is what they're going to use in 2022. We already see them laying the groundwork. Because Maria Bartiromo, I believe, is smart enough to know that Kevin McCarthy can write up all the articles of impeachment he wants. They're going nowhere because Republicans aren't in the majority. And I hope she's smart enough to realize that a member of the House isn't going to be able to invoke the 25th Amendment. That comes from the cabinet. I hope she'd, but it's about laying that ground, planting that seed in the angry person's mind that, yeah, we got to impeach him. So they're laying the groundwork so they can run on it in 2022. And hey, if they do win in 2022, their hopes and dreams and game plan of impeaching Biden and Harris, because Harris made the egregious error of going to the John McCain Memorial in Hanoi, the egregious error of doing that. So she's got to go too, so they can elect the former guy as Speaker of the House and install him as president, because that's what they do. The thugs want to come and overturn the apple cart and install what they want. Elections be damned. Vote counting be damned. And if it isn't what they want, they're going to rig it and fix it and do whatever they can to get it where they want. All while pointing their fingers at everyone else, saying everyone else is cheating. Because it's who they are. They're the spoiled kid in the cereal aisle who didn't get what he wanted. And they're throwing a fit about it. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
For many, the 8-hour day is the standard, but it wasn't always this way. The original American workday was from sunup to sundown, following the demands of an agricultural workday. Over time, the nation became more industrialized and workers moved from individually owned, self-sufficient farms to factories, taking workers from their homes and families. Factory owners demanded the agricultural sunup to sundown workday, forcing workers to toil long hours in grueling conditions. Workers began to collectively organize in pursuit of more time for family, education, and recreation. The cry of 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will grew louder. For a century, the 8-hour day was viewed as the holy grail of the labor movement, and for this hallowed vision, workers sacrificed, often with their blood and their lives. The first strike for shorter hours occurred in May of 1791 in the city of Philadelphia, where carpenters protested a day's wages, paying the same in January as was paid for a longer day in July. Chicago in 1886 was home to one of the largest showings of solidarity. Some 80,000 workers turned out to support the 8-hour cause. It was in Chicago's Haymarket Square that a terrorist bomb and the blazing guns of company-paid police cost policemen and numerous workers their lives and their blood. As a result of the Haymarket tragedy, 8 innocent men were tried and convicted for a crime they did not commit. 4 of the men were hung. The Haymarket Square tragedy was but one of many battles in which working men, women, and children shed blood, tears, and flesh in the pursuit of 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. That was the day that one of the most pitched battles
In U.S. labor history, the Battle of Blair Mountain began in West Virginia. Coal fueled the engines of industry, keeping the trains moving and the steel mills humming. Labor organizing in the coal fields faced violent repression. The conflict turned bloody at Matawan. Friend of labor, local lawman Sid Hatfield had won a gun battle against armed members of the notorious Baldwin-Felts Detective Agency. Then, other Baldwin-Felts agents, brought to West Virginia by the mine owners, gunned down Hatfield in cold blood. The miners' anger boiled over. 600 miners gathered under the United Mine Workers of America District 17 banner. The armed miners were determined to march into the state's southern coal fields. Their aim was to promote the union effort and sweep away the gunmen hired by the mining companies. As they marched, more and more miners joined them. As many as 10,000 miners converged on Blair Mountain. The high ground stood between the unionized northern part of the state and the less organized southern mines. At Blair Mountain, they met Logan County Sheriff Don Chafin, who had amassed an army of 3,000 armed men to repel the miners. Chafin's men had dug trenches, blocked roads, and marshaled machine guns to stop the Union men. In the battle that ensued, 1 million rounds were fired. The mine owners hired private planes to drop shrapnel bombs on the miners. The United States Army finally arrived. The miners, many of them World War I veterans, surrendered. Although the owners had won, what occurred at Blair Mountain drew national attention to the unsafe working conditions and the brutality of the coal barons in the coal fields.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Interesting story out in Butler County, Ohio. Evidently, a judge, Gregory Howard of the Butler County Common Pleas Court, ruled that the hospital, Westchester Hospital, part of the University of Cincinnati network, that they would indeed have to give Jeffrey Smith, a patient, this ivermectin. Evidently, the wife, I guess he's been on the ventilator. He's been there for, I guess, a month and a half now, it looks like. She filed a court order, says, hey, I want him treated with this. We found a doctor to prescribe it. The hospital said no. So she had to sue to get them to be able to, the hospital to give him the drug made for deworming livestock, of which, look, I believe the hospital said no and made them sue solely to cover their behind. So if something negative happens, but the judge is going to go give it to him. And I got to tell you, I don't know the judge is wrong. If you're on your last leg, maybe try, jumper cables, maybe try Clorox. Who knows what might work? Couldn't do any worse harm. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day and maybe a little bit about the hospital there in Ohio. Our good friend, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, what do you think? Is this an overreach by the courts to say no? You, the hospital, have to give this guy the drug. Any thoughts?
Well, this is Butler County, which is the home county of John Boehner, by the way, former Speaker of the House, just to give a little perspective down there. And this one, Rick, this one's got me a little baffled because the judges, he had a 2-page order. He doesn't explain his reasoning, behind his decision, which he's a judge, so he doesn't have to, but he doesn't explain it. And then they asked one of the university health spokespeople to comment, and he said, I can't because litigation and HIPAA says I can't, because we were kind of wondering on their end what it was, But this man Smith's been fighting the virus, for weeks, and so they used the request for emergency order. And what they say, the wife, Rick, said that she began researching COVID treatment options, and she came across several articles where COVID-19 patients were given the ivermectin, And after the treatment, she said all the patients left the hospital and they're home. So the attitude is, absolutely nothing to lose, no little risk, and they're going to go ahead and do it. So
that's kind of where my mindset is. Look, I mean, if he's
see what happens,
Yeah, look, maybe he's got worms that we didn't know about it.
You just don't know.
I wish him the best.
She researched it, and that's where this came from.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure she read the same pages on Facebook that I've seen of all the crackpots saying, no, it's the greatest thing in the world.
Now, Dr. Fauci did say that people shouldn't take it because there's no evidence it works. So, again, I don't know. We'll see. And now the FDA, by the way, tweeted, you are not a horse. You're not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it.
Yeah.
And that's what
the
they
FDA.
tweeted. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
That's what they actually tweeted.
And look, I mean, that's the reality. But here's the weird thing, and this is where I'm struggling with where we are in this moment. You're gonna go to Tractor Supply and you're gonna grab something off the shelf that's made for horses, but you're not gonna get the vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right, exactly.
I mean, you don't know what's in that. You don't know what doses to take. You're gonna hyperdose on zinc and this ivermectin. You're going to I've given up. I've almost given up on trying to figure them out. Also, interesting story from Cook County. I'm assuming this is Illinois, where a judge had asked a wife in a custody dispute if she has been vaccinated. She said no, and he gave custody to the husband.
Interesting.
I'm not sure how you can do that, but it is what it is.
That is very interesting. Huh.
It was actually New York. That I believe it. As I just scrolled through it.
Okay.
But I didn't know there was a Cook County in New York. I'm gonna have to go back to that. But I was reading through the story. I'm like going, I don't know. Is that something that you can give custody to one party over the other? And I guess it is what it is.
I mean, if you're in a courtroom and you've got a judge, there are certain things, I guess, that the Bar Association could call them up for, but probably won't in this case. They would probably reaffirm, the judge has the right. Plus, in this case, the judge would say, well, due to the medical issue, which one of the parents is the, more, let's say, solid parents when it comes to the medical side, and I guess you'd have to go with the vaccinated one. Yeah,
we definitely are in interesting times,
aren't we?
There is no question about that whatsoever. It's we are certainly in some very, very strange and interesting times. Let's move on. The last flight out of Afghanistan happened at 3:29 this afternoon. That's it. We're out of there finally. Thoughts?
Yes, we are. And when you read this article about the last flight, it's very interesting because it quotes since July the departure of 122,000 some people, and you read that, and then they were very careful on this, which is interesting. And when I saw the president say this, I thought, okay, somebody was smart to put that into the speech. And that's a while back when he said, we're going to evacuate any American that wants to leave.
Yep.
And he put that in there. And I had a couple of friends say, well, what do you mean want to leave? Well, I was in Iran in 1978, as you know. The revolution of the Shah started. There were 40,000 Americans when I went over there. I think by the time I left, probably half were gone. And I left, and then eventually, the rest is history. The Shah was overthrown, and we had, our hostages taken. And Americans still remain, some of them. Some of them are still there to this day. And so I know people do remain for reasons. There was one woman in Afghanistan, an American, I guess she was running a kennel and said, I'm not going to leave the dogs alone. And then, of course, there are people that are married into families, and they may choose to stay. So any American that wanted to get out was, There were no Americans per se on the last flight because they've already been out. And in the last 17 days, they have evacuated the largest airlift in U.S. history, and they've evacuated, again, over 120,000 U.S. citizens, citizens of the Allies, and, of course, Afghan allies of the United States. So I think that's quite amazing if you look at the numbers.
No, I think so, too. But, all I keep hearing from the right wing is how the egregious errors. You've got Maria Bartiromo asking Kevin McCarthy when they're going to start impeachment hearings and when they're going to invoke the 25th Amendment and all this stuff, because it was the worst thing ever. Egregious errors.
Well, there were some comments made, and they had an article today about some, not a lot, but some Democrats, of course, are going to focus on anything, that's said there. And then early on, of course, the Senate, some of the Democrats in the Senate had said they were going to do an investigation. And I'm just sitting here today wondering, after all of this, after everything, is done, what are they going to start doing now? Is the Senate really going to undertake an investigation? I mean, there are a couple of issues. The main issue is I think, the Bagram Air Force Base, and of course today the military and the White House were in a little bit different direction. The White House is saying this was the advice of the military. This is what they gave, and presidents can take the advice or not. But again, they were given advice to close Bagram in July, and so yes, there's some issues where they'll ask, people will say, well, should we have or shouldn't we have? But when you look at the fact, if they're going to have an investigation, what do you actually investigate? That you're going to investigate the 20-year war, or are you going to, investigate the closure of a base? I don't know what they're going to do with it.
No, I would like to investigate the beginning. I'd like to investigate, how we got there, why we were there so long, who made money off of it. I'd like to investigate all that stuff.
Why we undertook a civil mission. We had a military and a civil. When I was in Afghanistan, Rick, they briefed us on it. I was with Sheila Jackson-Lee and Paul Kanjorski and Dave Hobson at the time. He was, that's 2 R's and 2 D's. And we were there, and they said, we have a military and a civil mission, which was fine originally if they were going to have the 2 missions. But I guess the question is, how did it then go to this period of time to 20 years?
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the things I used to say
why was that decision made?
Back when I first started this show, one of the things I would always say about being over there is you can't have a civil mission. Militaries aren't made for civil missions. Militaries are made to break things and kill people. That's their job. Their job isn't to be peacemakers. Their job isn't to rebuild culture. Their job isn't to end, thousands of years of conflict with group therapy. Their job is to go out and blow things up and kill people.
Right, and those are things that again were stated. I was there, and it was February of 2002. This wasn't later on, 5 or 10 years. 10 years later, they were saying we're going to have a civil mission, and it was quote unique at the time. They were saying, and then as time went on, we did the same thing in Iraq. And I can remember a group protesting about it. Privately, I'm talking about in the meetings. And I know at one time I had made a statement about what are we doing? We're building basketball courts, and I got slammed down pretty hard. I can remember exactly who did it. It was Tom DeLay of Texas. I can remember. And basically in front of the caucus, actually threatening my chairmanship, about it. So, nobody particularly stopped it, and it went on and on and on. And it came to an end, and now it's done. So, like I said, I don't know what the aftermath's going to be. I don't know how they're going to, investigate. Yes, we lost some soldiers, and that happens in these situations, unfortunately, obviously. But as far as, doing the best job that they could do, the soldiers did a great job at the airport. They really did.
No,
you can't. Condition.
No. And look, all along the way, they've done done what they were asked to do, even if it was all over the place and honorably. There's nothing to point blame there. And if we have to blame, we start from the beginning and work our way through the whole thing.
Good, exactly.
It's that simple to me. But as I've said, it's good we're out of there. I'm not overly worried about terrorism coming out of Afghanistan right now. I'm more worried about domestic terrorism and the January 6th kind of things happening daily in this country at school board meetings. As I don't know if you've been following some of these school board meetings with some of the insanity coming out of them. I'm worried about another January 6th, but these happening almost daily or weekly.
Yeah, there's such a debate that's gone on, especially at these school board meetings, and I'm just looking at it, and then of course the vaccine debate. 51% of people in Ohio are vaccinated. That's it. 51%.
It's frightening.
And Sunday I was in the middle of a debate with people I know that I didn't want to hear it anymore because I've had the vaccination, and I was talking about getting the third booster, and by the end of the conversation I'm like, okay, look, I'm going to get it, and if you don't want it, I don't know what to tell you, but if you have to face a ventilator, it's not going to be pleasant. The reaction to the shot would be much better for you. Period.
Or you can go to the Tractor Supply and show a picture of a horse, so you can buy some ivermectin
and get your spouse to go to court for you.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's the route we have to go. I mean, it's really just crazy. And finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on Hurricane Ida. New Orleans just got slammed again, but surprisingly, they've just lost power for a while. I was expecting possible breach. Looks like they're gonna sneak through this one.
Well, I think they are, and it's not a Hurricane Katrina, but it was bad. They've got an immense recovery underway, and the hurricane devastated the southeast Louisiana coast, and it's obviously going to leave a lot of devastation and a wide path of some destruction, but it does look like they have avoided obviously what horrible carnage we saw when it came to Katrina, which was just unbelievable.
Yeah,
so it was bad, but it could have been horrifically worse.
Yeah, I mean, but here we are. What is this? The ninth, the ninth hurricane of the season.
Yes, sure, bad.
How many hurricanes do we usually get on an average year?
I don't know. I don't know. It does seem like we've had a lot.
I think 2005 they said there was something like a total of 28 that came through because they actually went to double A numbers and or double A names and stuff. Well, it's going to be a long year if this one is going to be indicative of any of the future ones. But Bob, I appreciate the time and the thoughts as
Thank
always.
You, Rick.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. No, I mean, look, I was watching some of the storm and oh my gosh. We've got friends down in New Orleans that I checked on to see how they're doing, and fortunately they got away fairly unscathed. But New Orleans is just a big fishbowl. If it fills up, there's no way of getting out. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the day that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Revenue Tax Act, more popularly known as the Wealth Tax. The act reformed the federal income tax to raise rates on the wealthiest in the nation. Those making over $5 million a year could pay taxes up to 75%. In a speech to Congress that summer, Roosevelt had explained his thoughts on wealth and taxes. The president said, quote, "Wealth in the modern world does not come merely from individual effort. It results from a combination of individual effort and of the manifold uses to which the community puts that effort. The individual does not create the product of his industry with his own hands. He utilizes the many processes and forces of mass production to meet the demands of a national and international market. Therefore, in spite of the great importance in our national life of the efforts and ingenuity of unusual individuals, the people in the mass have inevitably helped to make large fortunes possible. Without mass cooperation," FDR said, "great accumulation of wealth would be impossible save by unhealthy speculation." The president went on, "As Andrew Carnegie put it, where wealth accumulates honorably, the people are always silent partners. Whether it be wealth achieved through the cooperation of the entire community or riches gained by speculation, in either case, the ownership of such wealth or riches represents a great public interest and a great ability to pay." Although FDR tried to win over the nation's wealthy by quoting industrialist Andrew Carnegie, he did not gain their support. Not surprisingly, many of the nation's wealthy lobbied for and used tax loopholes to evade paying the new tax rates.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently the last country in the world to pump leaded gasoline has stated that they are going to stop. Algeria was the last place on the planet that you could get leaded gasoline to put in your junkers. And they evidently have finally stopped putting it in their petrol stations. This is one of those weird things why I never understood why they added it to gasoline, other than it was an additive to stop engines from knocking, and that was it. And there were other things that were probably a little safer, but a little bit more expensive. And it comes down to just, well, good corporate America making decisions on the health and well-being of society. And what we now know, looking back, and what they knew then, look, they began adding lead to fuel back in 1922. And as the UN experts have called it, a catastrophe for the environment and public health. By the 1970s, most people were like, the lead is bad. It is what caused the acid rain and, the massive problems that we had. Not to mention heart disease, strokes, cancers, all the things that are evidently still with us because it's in the soil, it's still in the food crops, and we haven't used leaded gas in this country. And I remember some of it in the mid '80s. We had gotten away from it. I think mid '80s is when we finally dumped that. But it was one of those things where you just go, why would they do that? Because it was cheaper. It saved them money. It was all about, lining their pockets. And of course, like everything, pushing the external costs onto we the people and our government. Because they're not the ones out there cleaning things up. They're not the ones who are suffering from all of this. Now, we know that, for years they used lead pipes, which has caused just chaos for years. And you look at Flint, Michigan, and other places across the country where you've got lead in the water because of the pipes that they've used. And another reason why we need a massive infrastructure bill. Another reason why, and we've needed for decades. This isn't new. But I thought it was interesting that, the Guardian ran this story about the fact that finally, the globe will be free of leaded gasoline. And I had someone, respond who said, the right's sad because they can't put it in their junker cars, and they, because they're always wanting to shoot you with lead. And I'm not going there, but it is a step in the right direction that we take this completely away. And the lesson here at home is we should be digging up all of those lead pipes and replacing them with new technology, with better pipes. Our water systems are crumbling. Our water systems are in trouble. We need to do something. Massive infrastructure. And look, I look at Katrina. You want to look at where we could do some more investing? We've got problems coming in the future. As climate change continues, these storms are going to get worse. This was a major one. And fortunately, a lot of people dodged a bullet. But again, sadly, I was reading reports of, folks who live there not being able to have the money to evacuate. At some point, maybe a public infrastructure for evacuations where people can actually get out of Dodge. Just kind of a thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Big week ahead. President Biden's going to give a speech tomorrow on Afghanistan. I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say there. And I'm sure the rage machine will continue, and there'll probably be another cretin screaming about masks. So big fun ahead. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.